Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Julie and I am an LMHC intern. On this channel we talk about three main topics, although I have been slacking on one, those being makeup, music, and mental health. I am super excited to make more makeup videos, however, I already have my makeup on from this morning, so I'm gonna save those for when I have more time. Anyway, getting into the video. So to introduce this topic, I feel very strongly as a mental health advocate about destigmatizing the conversation surrounding mental health, as well as erasing the stigma surrounding various mental health issues. I think this is really important. I think that all mental illnesses are still stigmatized to some extent to this day, which is unfortunate, but I think that there's a lot we can do and work toward to make a difference with that. So one disorder in particular that I feel incredibly strongly about, talking specifically about the stigma surrounding borderline personality disorder. I feel that this is a mental disorder that's deeply stigmatized, deeply misunderstood, and there's a lot of hurtful assumptions that people make about individuals with this mental health issue. For anyone who has not heard of stigma before, the stigmatizing of mental disorders tends to occur when certain mental disorders come with negative misconceptions about someone's ability to have loving, caring relationships and or be a functional individual. Some mental health issues are more stigmatized than others. So depression and anxiety, in my opinion, are probably the two most prevalently discussed mental health issues. And although that's great and we've come a long way with it and tons of people struggle with those things and it's important, representation for all mental health issues is important as well. And proper, accurate representation in the media, with YouTubers talking, with celebrities, whoever it is representing, it makes a huge difference and helps to kind of crush that stigma a little more. I would argue that personality disorders in particular are highly stigmatized against, although I would say the general public probably doesn't have a good idea of what they all are, which makes sense. I didn't either till I started studying psych, although I knew about borderline personality disorder. I would say this is the most talked about one. Borderline personality disorder in particular is extremely stigmatized, and I don't even think this is my opinion. I think this is just said by clinicians and individuals pretty much everywhere from what I've seen online and heard from other people. So borderline personality disorder is also sometimes referred to as emotionally unstable personality disorder. And within this disorder, individuals have difficulties navigating relationships and having healthy relationships. They also struggle to regulate their own emotions and struggle with a lot of distressing emotions, especially anger and rage, and to engage in reckless and impulsive behaviors. And some of those can be toward other people. It can be toward themselves, putting themselves in danger. And they also tend to struggle with self-harm and suicidality. And it's important to distinguish that the self-harm and suicidality is in a different criterion category for the diagnosis than the reckless and impulsive behaviors, because obviously they're a little bit different from each other. So obviously all those aspects going on in your life would be extremely difficult for anyone to deal with, which is why I think we need to have more empathy toward this population, which is a very controversial opinion, and I'm not cool with that because that needs to change. Borderline personality disorder has 9 specific possible symptoms, and you need 5 for a diagnosis, although you, I believe, can be diagnosed with traits of BPD with 4 out of the 9 symptoms. I'm not going to spend this video going over exactly what it is here, since this is focused on stigma, but I'd be happy to make a video going over it, even though there are a ton. It would help me to study for my counselor exam too, so that would be cool. So from what I've looked into, there are 4 subtypes of borderline personality disorder, and there also is quiet BPD. And quiet BPD is not in the DSM-5. It's not clinically significant yet, but it doesn't take away from the validity of this, because I have seen clinicians, including Dr. Todd Grande, who I have been so into lately because he has a doctorate in counselor education and supervision, which is what I want to do one day. And so he has a video talking about quiet BPD, and I will link it below because I think he's one of the most well-informed people on this platform. I think Katie Morton has a video on it. I can link that one as well. So it is being talked about and validated by clinicians that it is a very real thing. And I absolutely believe that it is not only from these clinical experts, but also from people who have suffered from quiet BPD and have talked about it and posted about it. And it is very valid. So if you are watching this and you have BPD and your clinician feels it's quiet BPD or you identify with it, just know that you are valid. And I'm sorry for the stigma that you have faced, along with everyone else watching this that has BPD or another mental disorder, because it's just not fair and it's not okay. And we need to make some changes. And that's what I'm here for, one step at a time. From what I have looked into, and I would have to look into it more, so I would suggest watching these other videos. Quiet borderline personality disorder specifically pertains to individuals who self-inflict their anger and rage within the disorder, as well as other distressing emotions. So instead of reacting behaviorally on other people and hurting other people in some way, they turn inward and really do a number on themselves. And it's like they probably have the urge to hurt others, but for some reason are able to resist and hold back. And although that's commendable, it's really upsetting and sad how much pain they're in and how much, they're taking out on themselves, because that just must be horrible to live with. There's a big narrative that people with BPD are manipulative. Now, I'm not saying that there are no people with BPD that are manipulative. Here's what I'm saying. There are people who are manipulative. They have BPD, they have depression, they have no mental illness, they have stress in their life, whatever it may be. It doesn't validate it, it doesn't make it okay. No one should be manipulative, but just grossly assuming that, people with BPD are the most manipulative people in the whole wide world is a really hurtful and stigmatizing assumption. Now, this might not be an assumption for some people. It might be their opinion, right? Because some people have been hurt by someone with BPD. They have had something horrible happen with a loved one who's been afflicted by this mental health issue. But to generalize that an entire population of people, and now we're at like 5 subtypes of this illness, all are exactly the same, is not true. There are 9 symptoms. Each individual needs 5 for a diagnosis. They are not all going to be the same 5. And regardless, I would argue that none of the symptoms really point to manipulation, although it can be a result of the extensive amount of trauma that someone has suffered in their lives. Again, I'm explaining it. I'm not validating it. I'm not excusing it. I'm just identifying that this assumption is really damaging people, and we need to make a change. I would also argue that some people manipulate intentionally and some people manipulate unintentionally, and that needs to be considered as well. I will say I know of people who their therapist has told them you need to avoid people with BPD, or they themselves have said, I've had bad experiences with people with BPD and I don't want to befriend or date anyone with that anymore. And I'm not saying you're wrong, because you're a human being with your own feelings and your own experiences, and you are totally entitled to set that boundary and make your own personal decisions about what kind of people you want in your life. I think that that's okay, but saying that your preference is what everyone should be doing isn't okay, because everyone is an individual human being, and individuality is a precious and incredible thing that needs to be respected, and everyone needs to form their own opinions about things. So if this is something that you identify with, that is totally okay. But please, I encourage you not to spread the narrative to other people. Say you're talking to your friends about a bad experience that happened to you with someone with BPD, right? You have to say, this is the experience I had with this person, instead of generalizing, well, they're all like that. I think that's a big misconception. Absolutely. It absolutely is. And personally, I can't share diagnoses, but I can say I do not have BPD, although I definitely identify with some of the aspects of it. And I can't disclose and get into detail, but just to show you that I care about this and relate to this, and that's the good place that I'm coming from with it. I will say that I've had people in my life that have had BPD that have not been kind and have been hurtful. And I've had people in my life that have had BPD that are absolutely wonderful. And I've never had a single issue in the friendship whatsoever. That's my personal experience. I obviously am open to befriending people with mental health issues. I am very open to that as long as they communicate and are willing to work toward things in the relationship. But personally, I'm willing. So, and if you're not, again, I respect that. You are allowed to make that decision, but please don't make that decision for other people. Please don't warn other people about people who have BPD. You can warn people about red flags you see with any individual, but please do not make it about, oh, they have BPD. Even if that's been your experience, even if every single person with BPD you have ever met has hurt you and has been malicious and has been manipulative, it does not indicate that that is the same for the entire population. This part bothers me the most. So this is about the stigma with BPD with clinicians, which I just think is absurd. I think it comes from a place of burnout because I think, of course, there are people with BPD who relationships are hard. So of course the therapeutic relationship is going to be hard, right? And I can empathize that some individuals with this illness may be difficult to work with in some ways, but at the same time, if we feel that we are not the best fit for someone with this illness, we need to refer them out. But the way we refer them out needs to be more informed. There are therapists that will just say, okay, this client has BPD, they're out. Like, I'm not seeing them anymore. They need to be referred to someone who can treat them right. Someone who specializes in DBT, someone who specializes in BPD. Perhaps they're a trauma specialist or they do trauma-informed care. Because the approach that we use to treat PTSD, complex PTSD, and trauma is fairly similar to how we treat BPD. There are distinctive differences because there are differences in the diagnoses, but DBT itself and trauma-informed care are the two gold standard treatments for these mental health issues at this time. This is another controversial opinion, and I worry about sharing this at times, but BPD needs to be treated for what it is. I saw an article on this, and I'm going to find it and share it with you guys. BPD is a trauma response. Does this mean you have to invite people with BPD in your life? No. Does this mean that you have to have empathy for them? You're not their clinician. You're not in their life. No. You absolutely don't have to. But I am going to sit here and educate you on the fact that most of the time, BPD is a trauma response. One of the most influential causes for BPD later in life is childhood trauma. Just like PTSD, complex PTSD, that sort of thing. I did learn from Dr. Todd Grande that not everyone with BPD has a trauma history, but I'm interested because, like I said in my trauma-informed care video, I feel like we all do in some ways, even if they are micro traumas or smaller, and that small things in our childhood are what seem smaller to other people can still affect us. And it's all about how we perceive the situation and how we've processed or failed to process the situation, and that's really how it affects us. So again, if we're treating BPD with trauma-informed care, then we're treating it for what it is, which is a trauma response. Another issue with the stigmatization of BPD is that I feel like there are people who are ashamed of the diagnosis, who are afraid of having the diagnosis because of what will happen, and that just points to how bad this stigma is right now and that it needs to change. There are people that will disclose to their loved ones, I have depression, anxiety, things like that, but they won't share the BPD. And it may be on their own accord, or it may be because they've tried to and people have just not understood. They didn't know what it was. They heard negative things about it. And within BPD, right, is fear of abandonment, and we don't want to lose people because we have BPD, right? So that's really scary to think about, and it's really sad because this is the whole thing with the stigma, right? I can say to you, I have diabetes. I don't, but still. I can say I have acid reflux, which I do, and no one's gonna flinch. No one's gonna care. It's totally fine to talk about it, but then it comes to mental illness and we're not supposed to tell anyone. As clinicians, I get it. It's a little bit different for me to disclose that kind of thing to a client, and I respect that, but personally, in my personal life with my loved ones and my friends and things, I am very open about that, and I am open about what I deal with and what I struggle with. And I hope that we live in a world one day where people feel more comfortable doing that and are more respected and accepted when they do so instead of stigmatized. So here's one of my unpopular, controversial suggestions. I don't love censorship. I really don't. I feel that psychoeducation, especially in schools and things, needs to happen from a young age. We should not be waiting till middle and high school to teach kids about anxiety and depression and certain things. We also should not be limiting ourselves to only talking about anxiety and depression. What about bipolar disorder, borderline personality disorder? What about schizophrenia? What about PTSD? What about complex PTSD? What about all social anxiety, OCD, phobias, agoraphobia, specific phobia, whatever it is, all these things that people deal with that, oh, it's not depression and anxiety, people don't know what it is. Let's change that. Let's educate, let's talk, and let's be open and have a conversation because it's important. And the myth that when kids hear about diagnoses, they'll start having them themselves is just that. It's a myth. Research has backed that up time and time again. It's just like talking to kids about suicidality. It doesn't put it in them. It doesn't give them the idea. If they take it to that extent, something else is going on, and that needs to be recognized. That's all I have for today. I hope that you got something from this video. You can like and subscribe if you enjoy this kind of content. Again, I'll be posting a makeup video soon. Thank you for watching, and leave a comment if you would like, as long as it comes from a kind place. Have a good day, everyone. Bye.